Hello.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. We are so happy to have you here. If you haven't seen the description box and the title and all that stuff, which you probably have, but if you haven't, hello. Welcome back to the channel. I have with me Daina, the ShadowMoonWitch. Oh, look, I even pointed in the right direction.
I never do that. I'm like, here, that what?
Especially here, because it's like always mirrored.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome, Daina. Daina has a channel.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I have a link to Daina's channel down below, and you've been making like fun, awesome, like pretty, like I think really deep and thought-provoking content, especially around witchy topics for how long now?
Well, originally I was on YouTube actually back in 2009 when I was 23 years old. And
Wow.
I was there for a good couple of years, and then life got in the way. In between that time I got married, I had kids, and then in 2018 I decided to come back because I just needed the camaraderie and the connection with sharing my path. And I felt that after the 10 years difference that there was more that I could bring now than I could then after another decade of knowledge. So here I am again.
Oh my gosh. So what was YouTube like? You were on YouTube like, back then. I know it's not that long ago, but it feels like, well, 10 years, that's a long time, I guess. So how did it feel then versus now as far as like creating content and stuff?
It was more difficult technology-wise, for sure. A lot easier to do. It's a lot easier to do things like live stream now. It's a lot easier to pump out content continuously, especially with smartphones and things like that now too. That sort of, those weren't really prevalent with recording videos and stuff very well in 2009, 2010. So that's one plus. The other is that back then the community was very different. There was more people. There was a different group then. For instance, the big one was Tiptoe Chick, who passed away in 2018, and she was a wonderful inspiration. But yeah, the community was very different than it is now, and it's not bad; it's just different.
Probably bigger, right? I would think
much bigger, yes.
Yeah,
which is one of the reasons that that's kind of kept me here. That's kept me engaged too, and I've really enjoyed it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny because I'm definitely far more on like, I guess, the tarot divination corner of the YouTubes more so, I would say, than the witchy side, although I make content that kind of crosses both. But it's definitely interesting because when I came in, there was definitely a certain sort of crowd of people. I felt like I was constantly seeing their videos and like watching their discussions on topics. And yeah, so I imagine it would have changed a lot. But yeah, the technology, even in just 10 years, it will have changed so much.
Yep.
That's crazy. So today we're going to be chatting about like spellcrafting. So we were talking about like sort of what topic to do here for Eclectic Witchcraft this time. And this has been a requested topic a lot in this series where I think people want to just dive into sort of how to do spell work, like why, the whats, the whens, the fors, all the words, all the things. So I figured we'd dive into that. I've asked you ahead of time, but just to let everybody in the chat know, I have a live draw to do for a giveaway that I mentioned in my This or That number 3 of the Hero's Journey Dream Oracle. So if y'all entered for that, I'm going to draw for this real quick so that we get this done and the winner picked, and then we're going to dive into spellcrafting content. I just didn't want to leave this another week. So thank you, Daina.
You're most welcome.
I'm going to throw the wheel up and do this like right now. So let's get this done, and then we're going to dive into all the spellcrafting chit chats and good stuff. So, and hello to everybody in the room. I just like launched right into like the conversation.
I was just speaking over.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's got the wrong picture. Hold on. Clearly, I am winning at the YouTubes today. Let me make sure the right wheel is open. That looks like my old giveaway. Anyways, in the meantime, I hope everybody in chat has something delicious to snack on or to drink, because y'all know we are going to be here for like a bit. There we go. Now I have the right wheel. That makes more sense. You can tell I do giveaways a lot when I can't get the right wheel. Okay, now I have it. Now I have it. Okay, so if you entered for the Hero's Journey Dream Oracle, that is the name I'm about to draw. There was like a gazillion entries. I don't remember how many, but there was a lot. So this was open internationally. I will send it to whoever's name I pick. Just make sure you email me within the next week. So let's say by Thursday, June, whatever the heck day that is, 3rd. By the end of the day, Thursday, June 3rd, please contact me and I will make sure that your prize gets sent off to you. And with that, I'm going to pick a name like right now. Let's do it. Boom. Clearly, I did not need coffee today. Is it obvious? Did not need the coffee. Mary Zwala Esparza. I probably totally slaughtered your name, but congratulations. Yay! You won this day. So email me, lisa@supportivetarot.com by next week, pretty please, and I will get this sent off to you ASAP. Thank you for this brief intermission. All right, congratulations, and let's talk spellcraft. So, okay. You look like you were about to say something. What were you going to say?
No, I was just doing the goofy, like, yes, let's get into it thing.
Let's get into it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I remember when I was first sort of diving into witchy everything and being curious about everything. To me, it was like spells was like the thing that made it witchy, that made witchcraft, right? But the funny thing is that I don't know that it was ever what I thought it was going to be. So I'd be curious hearing from you, like, when you first, I guess, started exploring witchcraft, was spell work something you wanted to get into right away? And like, I guess what I'm kind of trying to find out is what your impressions were of it before you got into it, and then like once you started getting into it. You know what I mean?
I feel like you and I will probably have some similarities in the timing of which we stepped into the craft, just because I know that you've been reading tarot since the late 90s. Whereas I stepped into the craft and stuff, I think 2000, right about.
Yeah.
14, 15 years old. And it first started with me mostly reading about psychic abilities and mediumship and things like that, trying to understand some of the things that I was experiencing. But then it branched out into Wicca. And it was like, I know a lot of people describe the coming home feeling, but that's exactly what it was for me. I was like, this is everything I've been feeling my whole life. And I can actually do spellcraft, and that's something that I can do, and I'm not alone in wanting to feel this way or wanting to have these experiences. And so I would go down to my library in my hometown after school every day, and I just scour the books in the metaphysical section. And growing up in Washington State, which I know you did too, it's a very progressive state. So
yeah, we were so lucky to be in that area and have access to those resources, right? I feel like I was very blessed because it was, like you said, it was like, for me, it was mid 90s. So I graduated high school in 95. Whoever wants to do the math, feel free. And right around that time, I was starting to like tiptoe into these waters. And we had a couple really great bookstores, and along with those study groups and things like that. Yeah, it was like coming home for sure. I think for me, I was really hesitant and skeptical of spell work specifically, because at least when I first began, on one hand, part of me thought it was the most amazing, like, oh, are you guys getting echo? Hold on, let me sort that out. It might be, my thing might be a little too turned up. Hold on. Let me try turning it down. And thanks for letting me know, guys. Let me know if that's any better. But no, I'm not on headphones. I'm on a microphone. But usually it doesn't come back too much. Let me know if that's any better. So you're hearing Daina's voice echoing, right, guys?
Yeah, I was hearing it too.
Were you?
It's still going.
Still going? Just checking my microphone. Not getting fresh. Hold on, let me change the oh, I know what I need to do. Hold on. I think I've got it. Let's try this. Can you try talking, Daina, and we'll see if we've still got the echo?
Yeah, I don't hear it.
Are we good?
We're good. Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, I just switched away from pardon me, from my microphone. That's my little extra guy. Okay. So just keep me posted. I am on my camera's microphone, which does occasionally pop up with like a squeal or something. So if that happens, please let me know right away and I'll switch back to something else. I have 3 different audio options, so I'll sort it out when it happens. But yeah, anyway, I think we were just chatting about like sort of, oh yeah, I was talking about how I was skeptical because for me, when it came to spell work, on one hand, I thought it was really cool and exciting, but on the other hand, whenever I tried to do it, at least early on, it felt very much like acting or like role playing. It didn't feel real to me.
Yes. That took me years and years. I still struggle with it sometimes where I'm just like, okay, how do I get out of that mindset where I kind of feel a little silly? And it's just funny because this is something that is so ingrained in my heart and my soul and everything beyond. This is who I am, and it's something I'm deeply passionate about, yet I can still feel really funny about it.
Yeah. And I think partly for me anyways, it was not understanding, I guess, or not having for myself a belief about how or why it worked. So curious, what are your theories on how spellcraft works?
So I really am very big into the manipulation of energy or the intention that I'm putting out. And I also very strongly believe that everybody is meant to see or believe the divine in their own way and whatever works for them. So, for instance, if someone wants to put an intention out through, I'll pray for you, that's awesome. And I do feel like that resonance is very similar to what we do. It's just gone about in a different way. Like it might be kind of a slightly different energetic footprint or, whereas what we do is that's just how we tap into that collective energy. And that's sort of it's really hard to put into words, but that's sort of how I've always looked at what I'm doing, essentially.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if somebody, it's kind of funny, when Peggy and I got married, we passed our rings through the crowd for people to put intention over. And the way we expressed it, did you?
Yeah, we did that too.
I love that. And we had the thought that like, however people choose to do that, if they're wishing us well, and that's what we said, if you want to just, think something nice or say a little prayer or however you want to imbue that energy into it. It was one of my favorite parts from the ceremony. And you're right. It's like, it's all these different paths, or I've often seen the different ways of working with energy, whether it's prayer or meditation or spell work, all as like spokes on a wheel. But also for me, especially in the beginning, I needed to come at it for myself to, I guess, get what I needed out of it. I needed to come at it from a sort of psychological place. And I can't remember where I first encountered the idea that spellcraft in a way is a way to tap into the power of your own subconscious. And so this outside of the energetic stuff that I also believe, but that took me a little longer to sort of feel and know. But it really began for me with that concept that like our subconscious mind thinks in like images and symbols. And so if we wanted, my favorite example is if you want to get a new job or you want to make more money, you do spell work, and a lot of the common stuff would be like, use a green candle or put a money thing under your candle or gold or things that have associations to money. And the way that I guess I used to explain it to people or to myself in the very beginning was like, okay, so I'm kind of just telling my subconscious this is something I'm trying to attract. And my subconscious recognizes those symbols and hopefully will be doing some work in the background, like making me more confident when I go to that job interview or when I ask for a raise, so that it like kind of gives me those little boosts. So that's sort of my non-magical, I guess, take on how spell work could work. And then over time, I think I got more and more comfortable with understanding the movement of energy and how that can have an impact and trusting that that part of it works also. But I don't know, to meet me, I had to kind of meet myself where I was with the psychological piece initially, you know what I mean? In order to feel less like I was play acting. And I mean, like you said, I still feel like that sometimes, depending on the working, or if I'm going into an area of magic I've never delved into before, then I can really feel that way. Yeah.
And see, I think for me, the psychological aspect to the energetic aspect, those are two, like a side to each coin, like the same coin, essentially.
Yeah.
Two sides to the same coin. There's the phrase. to me, my path is also very psychological, and I really dive a lot into mental health and how to heal. And I know you do that too, especially with the self-worth path and all the wonderful work you've done.
Uh-huh.
And I know a lot of people have come to this path because they've realized I can claim my own power. And
Yeah.
that is huge because so many people have felt that they couldn't. And I think that when we even when it comes to ritual, I started to realize I don't need to feel silly. This is
Yeah.
actually something that I can put on ritual makeup. I can play a part, but step into another version of myself. Maybe this version lives in my subconscious, as you were just talking about. Maybe she lives in my dreams. Maybe she's another aspect of my spirit. But either
Yeah.
way, I can become her in the physical realm and then transcend into whatever else I need to tap into. And I
Yeah.
think that's really powerful too.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you're in a lot of ways when you are getting into a magical headspace, or however you wanted to describe that feeling of shifting, in a way there's almost a conscious glamoring happening where you are embodying an archetype of yourself, like the empowered archetype, the sovereign archetype, or the healing archetype, or whatever it is that you need to access in that moment. You're sort of stepping into that space. And I think that's a beautiful way to describe what intention can be, right? Because I think sometimes we think of intention as a goal, and I think that's the most superficial layer of it. But I think when you dive deeper into intention and how intention works magically, you realize that what you really are doing is stepping into that intention. You're embodying that entire energetic space. So if you want to do healing magic, you're literally embodying an archetype of healing, of the healer, to heal yourself, or empowerment, or manifestation, or whatever kind of work you're trying to, or protection, like something really strong and ferocious, right? Depending on what it is you need to do, you're almost like being that intention, which is not something I really thought until you were just saying what you were saying, but it just sort of clicked that that's kind of what we're doing, right? We're sort of donning this energy as a way to be what it is we're trying to do. Is any of that coming across?
That makes perfect sense to me. I was actually just thinking, once we step past the concept of the intention is a goal and that's the tip of the iceberg and it goes deeper than that, the possibilities are limitless, especially with
Right.
how you can play this out, how you can go about it. And it really transcends into all magic and all possibilities of what you can achieve and how you want to go about it, how you can express yourself as a witch. And it's amazing to me.
Yeah, it's like this big open field that we get to play in. So when it comes to actual spells, because I want to kind of keep this, I want to, or I guess, invite a conversation around sort of, especially to somebody who maybe hasn't done a lot of spell work in the past, like to try to form a bit of an idea of what that could look like, especially if you think, or if you come from a kind of background where you think maybe you need a spell book or you need this, or you need that, because I want to kind of talk about how we can craft our own magic. I guess to start with, how do you define, like there's ritual and there's ceremony and there's the kind of day-to-day magic we do, but when it comes to like creating a spell, how do you define, I guess, how would you define a spell versus maybe something else you might do in your practice?
So when I sit down to do spell work, I usually have an intention in mind. I have something that I want to achieve or something that achieves kind of a more broad term, but I mean, I have something in mind that I'm hoping to change or alter or shift or all of that. When I sit down to do a ritual, it's more of I'm honoring the moon, I'm honoring the cycles, I'm honoring the nature, or I'm honoring the nature, I'm honoring death, I'm honoring my deities, the planet. Or I'm looking to connect with that energy. That's a little different to me.
Yeah.
Spell work is definitely, I am putting together a recipe for whatever it is that I'm hoping to bring into my life or bring to someone else's life.
Yeah.
The very first spell I ever did was actually me writing down all of what I was thinking and feeling because I was trying to make sense of dealing with depression as a teenager. And I took it outside to like those old tin coffee cans, the
Yeah.
big tin Folgers ones, and I threw it in and I burned it. And that was the first spell I ever did.
Oh, I
And
love that.
I do that a lot now if
Yeah.
I'm struggling with some some feelings that I can't, or if I come across something that's painful and I'm like, I don't need this anymore, so I'm just going to light it up in my cauldron. And it's that to me has always been like base line for spell work. It's how I dipped my toes in, because for new witches, this is intimidating. And to know that you can start simple with something like that really helps as soon as you realize it doesn't have to be grandiose, you know? It can be as simple as lighting something on fire. It can be as simple as stirring your morning coffee and just being like, you know what, today I'm just going to put blessings into this, that I will have energy to get through the day, or I'll feel good today, or something will happen and I'll have, I'll feel connected to my spiritual self, or I'll feel love for myself. It doesn't have to be big. It can be big.
That.
If you want to go big, go big.
Go big or go home. No, but that's so true. It sounds like, if I'm hearing you right, it kind of sounds like your definition really of spell work is when you're doing something to affect a change. Like that's really the sort of foundation of it for you. Yeah. And I think it is for me too. I think what makes a spell work what makes a spell to me, I guess, is for me intention and planning. It's kind of like, well, I should even say planning, but it's definitely I'm thinking through something I want to accomplish. So there's it's an action-oriented thing for me. It's an active process as opposed to a passive process. Even when I'm creating something that I hope to work passively. And I've talked a little bit on this channel and in this series about passive magic versus like more active magic. But yeah, that's definitely a piece. So I had a question here I wanted to address. Oh, here. So Brittany says, I'm a total newbie and haven't even done a spell yet. It seems very overwhelming to me right now. I don't even know what I want to bring into my life. Do you recommend getting a book to get started? I would say, okay, my thoughts, and then I'm going to ask you your thoughts, Daina. So I think you could go either way. I think it depends on whether you're creating structure and like that guiding hand, or if you just want to dip your toes in and kind of develop something that's more organic. And I also think there's some things that might bridge the gap, such as Kellyanne Maddox's book, Rebel Witch, where she's helping you to kind of figure out your own way. I think you could go a number of ways. But what about you, Daina? What would you recommend to somebody just starting?
I wish I had Kellyanne's book when I was starting out. I wish that there was someone to tell me this doesn't have to be this way. But when you're first stepping into this, it can be overwhelming to have that approach from Kellyanne's book as well, because then you kind of don't really know where to go. For me, it was easy to love and adore that book because I had the foundation of, okay, green usually means prosperity or money magic. Yeah. Okay, but it doesn't necessarily have to if I don't want it to. I can go on however I would like to represent that. But I do think that sometimes it is good to start with a baseline and then branch out from there, at least so you have a general concept of what you're doing, how to work from it, and then you can get your Rebel Witch on to our dear Kellyanne that we adore.
I think too in the beginning, like some foundational stuff is helpful, right? So I grew up on books like Scott Cunningham's A Witch Alone, right? The very first solitary witch, Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner, or one, I can't remember. Witch Alone and Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner might be two different books now. I'm not sure. Those are the ones. They are. Yeah, I think they are too. So, but I think a Wicca Guide for the Solitary Practitioner, I think that's Scott Cunningham's first book. Yep. And that was really helpful to me. I will say that a lot of the books do have a heavy Wicca focus, which is, I think, a good way to sort of like explore more common neo-pagan concepts and traditions, as long as you understand that Wicca does have a very specific slant on the craft and the practice and has its own traditions associated with it. So depending on how traditional the books are that you dip into, you may find that that's a thing. Now I do have in the description box below, I should have a link to our resource list that we've been building throughout the Eclectic Witchcraft 101 series. So there should be some books in there on general witchcraft, including some of the Scott Cunningham stuff. But if other people in the chat have other books to recommend that you think are just perfect for somebody brand new, I really liked Patricia Cornwell. Nope, that's the wrong author. That's a fiction author. Oh my gosh, who am I thinking of? Yes. Oh my God, thank you for reading my mind. Yeah, Phyllis Curot's Witchcrafting, which is her more 101 style book, and her actual like almost memoir / novel, Book of Shadows. Oh my God, my brain. Those are really good.
There's another one that I've really enjoyed called The Circle Within by Diane Sylvan, I think is her name.
Ooh, I don't think
That
I've
was
read
really
that.
good. It's very good. It is again very like Wicca centric based, but
Yeah.
it's a fantastic book, and just I enjoyed how she went about it, her perspective, and she that one I haven't read in years, but it lives on my shelf. I'm never gonna get rid of it.
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, and Dustin, Modern Metaphysique, makes a good point. He said, I would not point a newbie. Where did it go? Here, I want to put the comment up. Here it is. I would not put a newbie to Wicca books in today's day and age with a plethora of great non-denominational books. And that's a really great point. It's hard to find those in some kind of like collective resource list, but that's a really, really good point. And I think, like I said, this is where it's good to sort of check in with other people in the community. And I do think YouTube is actually a pretty great resource. You have to use your discernment.
Oh, yeah.
But like watch different content creators talking about witchcraft and spell work and magic and kind of get a feel for the different viewpoints that are out there. I think that really goes a long way too. And we had another question here that I wanted to grab.
I think one thing with Dustin's point is that you and I are both coming from the perspective of that's what there was when we started. So I am glad that he brought that up, because we haven't had to read 101 books in 2 decades. So what is out there now? I would love to know too.
Yeah, there was a recommendation in chat, I know, for was it Weave the Liminal by Lauren Tempest-Stockcroft?
That one I have not read. It was What is Remembered Lives that I'm thinking of. That one's good, but I've been wanting to read Weave the Liminal. I've been curious about that one.
I also think Hereditary, or is it called Hereditary Witchcraft? No, Traditional Witchcraft, which is more of the, I want to say the British. I'm so bad at like getting my stuff wrong, but like I have a bunch of book recommendations that came up in an earlier chat that are, I think, a lot more sort of folk magic-y based, which have a lot of really good stuff in them too. And I think, yeah, a lot of us are coming from those of us who got into witchcraft in like the 90s or the early 2000s. A lot of us were exposed to Silver Ravenwolf and Starhawk and those kinds of things. There's so much out there now that, yeah. And there's even a book, I meant to grab it and it's over on my bookshelf, but it's called Spellcrafting. I haven't read it yet, so I don't know if I can recommend it, but I think that book is literally the premise of like building your own spell work and that sort of thing. So I guess one of the things I wanted to talk about is, at what point do you feel like, you talked about for mental health purposes, and I think that, and I do a lot of spell work around my healing and personal growth, so I think we've got a lot of that in common. But other than that, or in addition to that, I guess I should say, what else do you find yourself automatically or kind of more naturally thinking, I want to do spell work about like this? This is the thing I really want to go to my magic for, my cauldron for.
So I'm actually kind of silly, and I tend to forget that I can do spell work.
That's not silly. I do that too.
I go through every other avenue, and then I'm like, oh, I should get witchy with this. Like, what am I doing?
I do that all the time.
And it drives me nuts because I'm complaining incessantly about the fact that I need to be more hands-on in my craft and feel more connected, especially as a mother of young kids. And then I don't do it. Like, I don't think, oh, right, I can do spell work. That's,
That's another tool in my toolkit. Yeah.
But to answer your question, I think most of the time it is for personal development and self-empowerment and mental health and all that stuff. But also a lot of it is just connecting with the divine, feeling that spiritual presence, because quite frankly, I'm not a happy person until I can do that for myself. I'm not a happy person really until I can even just think and question the divine and things like that, or feel connected to nature. Those things make up the fabric of who I am, I think. And so a lot of my magical practice is really more diving into communing with deity, communing with the dead, communing with ancestors, because those are sort of staples for me. But the other things for spell work that I tend to go to are to help my family or help my friends and help other people that I love and care for. A good friend of mine is going through a loss. I'm going to light a candle for her tonight and, send the soul that's passing a safe journey. Or I just went through and re-blessed my home and did road opener oil and was thinking like, let's open some pathways for my family. Let's get some prosperity in here. We need this. Let's shake things up.
Yeah. I think it's kind of funny. Like you, I don't always remember like, oh yeah, I'm empowered. I have this tool in my toolkit. I can do this. But I do think I'm quicker to think of magic or of spell work as a tool when there's a crisis. And I'm much quicker to think of it when it's somebody else's crisis for sure than when it's my crisis.
I do that too.
It's like, oh, you're going through a thing. Let me light a candle. Let me do some witchy stuff. Let me do some magic. It comes so naturally. And then when it's me, it's almost like I want to almost exhaust my like mundane things before I remember that I have this extra tool. But you brought up something really interesting that was actually something that I wanted to bring up specifically, because I do know that everybody's approach to this is very, very different. But you mentioned your magic specifically with relation to deity connection. And I wanted to ask you this. For you, is your spell work or is your magic always bonded to your deity or spirit guide work? Or is it sometimes with deity and spirit guide and sometimes not? Or is it like, you know what I mean? Like where on that spectrum, I guess, would you say that you are?
I'm in the middle. It depends on what I'm doing, what I'm hoping to achieve. If I feel like they can help, if I feel like they want to help, then I'll call them in. If it just doesn't really vibe with them or doesn't really vibe with me, then it's like, I got this, I'll handle it. But there are specific things, specific subjects, or for instance, Freya's my matron, and I really go to her for like self-love and empowerment and sexuality and all the things that she represents. So usually if I'm doing a working involving those things, I'm going to want her energy in there. But there's many other times where I'll be doing something and I won't have any presence of deity. It just depends on what I need.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about it, because I'm still very much in the stage of sort of building a relationship with deity. And as you were talking about how, you know, you will involve deity in your work, I was reminded of a post randomly that I saw on social media not that long ago, talking about people who've been through certain kinds of like personal experiences, difficult upbringings, trauma, that sort of thing. How sometimes there can be this like enforced independence, almost, so self-imposed independence of like, I don't need anybody, I got this, I can handle it kind of thing. This is a very weird winding thought road, but hopefully you just come along the right way.
I'm with you.
But I just realized as you were talking that I don't feel yet comfortable fully asking for any help or any boost from deity when I'm doing any magical work, which is why it's so fascinating to me that you definitely go to it more, I think, than I think to go to it. Whereas right now I feel like I'm very much in a devotion space, but not in a space where it would even occur to me to ask for help with a working. And it just I just connected those two dots and was like, oh, it's all part of the same trust thing. The same trust work that I'm doing in my daily life is also applying to my relationship with deity, which I realize is a whole side topic. But it just kind of made me realize that like I could be perhaps, you know, asking for or involving my spirit guides or deity in the work that I do magically. But it's like, oh no, I got this. I'll do this. This piece I'll do for myself. Almost like they're two separate things. I don't think it's really ever occurred to me to combine them. And yet saying that out loud sounds so silly, because I feel like it's such a natural thing to do, which is not something I've done.
So what you're describing, I like to call the lone wolf concept, or complex, I should say, because I do it too. And my advice to you, if you do want to start to experiment with having deity present in your spell workings, is honestly just start with that. Just say, come sit with me while I work, while I do this. Just come sit with me. You don't need to bring your energy or intention into what I'm doing. Just be present so that I know you're there. And there's times where I will just sit at the altar and talk, and I'll just, even just that, like, I'm like, just come sit with me. I need company.
That's really, really good advice, because I think sometimes I have this disconnect where that's concerned, almost like it's not even something I can or should do. It's really interesting, because whenever I do any kind of like astral travel work or like go chat with my guides, which is to me a very different relationship than my deity, but when I do that, when I do spirit guide work, I almost always get lectured, you know, oh, it's been a while, what are you doing? Like, how come, you know, I almost always get that kind of like loving, stern energy from my guides of like kicking my butt a little bit, but in a nice way. And it's kind of interesting that even given all that, I've never put those two things together until you said that out loud about deity work and in spell work. And yet I'd written it down as a question. That's the thing that's kind of blowing my mind right now. So obviously some part of me was super curious about this.
Well, sometimes they speak through others, I believe. So maybe your guides were like, she's going to bring your attention to this because we want your attention. So listen up, please.
Yeah, totally. Ricardo says, what about if you create your craft based on your own spirituality and feel almost a self energy, but no other energetic presence? Would that leave out deities, or is this self its own deity?
I love that. That is actually what my practice was for years and years and years, until I started to work with deity. I didn't start working with deity until I was 26 or 27. So at that point, it had been well over a decade that I had been in the craft.
Yeah.
And it started with that. And that's the thing, is that you don't have to work with deity to be a witch.
Thank you.
You don't have to be a witch to be a pagan.
No.
You can be both if you want. You can be one or the other, whatever works for you. Deity,
yeah, you can work with magic. It doesn't have to be any prescribed path, or it doesn't have to match up with anybody else. For me, the whole journey with the craft literally began because when I was attending church, I was feeling this deep connection to God, or however you want to express it, but a terrible disconnect with the church, and a terrible feeling like it didn't match up. And I have paintings from when I was 13, 14 that I was drawing myself outside, raising my arms to the sky, and it never made sense to me being inside of a building for worship. Again, total side tangent, but when we talk about how it's what you feel and know to be true in a way, that's kind of what that made me think of, Ricardo, was this idea that you can be connected to something. It doesn't have to be deity. I only really started connecting with deity in a I think a really significant way in the last couple of years. So it's really new in my practice. Everything before that was very self-driven and very sort of community energy driven and practice driven, but not at all deity driven. It was maybe spirit guides, animal guides, things like that I worked with, but never deity. It never felt like deity until recently. So yeah, you can definitely have all spectrums of experience without it being that specifically,
Exactly. It took me 20 years to claim a matron. 20 years.
Yeah.
I just
I'm not
did it in
even
January.
Yeah.
So, and that, you don't even have to. Thank you. You don't even have to do that, though, if you're working with deity. You don't have to claim a matron or a patron deity. You can even have someone just come into your practice for a short while, and then they can do their own thing and go their own way. Your craft can be completely secular. And that's the beauty of it, is that it can be whatever you need it to be.
Yeah, totally. So I'm going to try to anchor us to Spellcraft here and there occasionally, because I keep wanting to go off on all these
turn it.
So when it comes to spells or magical work that you do you feel like your spell work, do you lean more into a set it and forget it type of spell work, or the kind of work that you do and then when it's done, it's done? Or do you like to do the kind of spell work that is more long-term, that you maybe either you leave it or you maintain it in some way? Is it more of a short-term, sitcom, or movie length? You know what I mean?
I think it really depends. But for me, actually, for the longest time, I didn't really realize that I could continuously empower my intention or my spellcraft. It depends on what I'm doing, but I realized that in some way I actually was doing this for house cleansings. That's the same concept.
Yeah.
But why couldn't I bring this to say I'm doing a healing spell for chronic pain on myself or something? Why can't I just go back in and check in with that and see what's going on, and if I can empower that intention a little bit more? Yeah. So I'm starting to experiment more with that concept now, but I went all this time just being oh, that's not even a thing. Now I guess it is a thing, and I technically was doing it in one way but not another,
Yeah, totally. I think for a long time my go-to was the kind of spell work I imagine in books, where you sit down, you do the spell is finished, and you go about your day. But more and more I have things that I feel like some of that stuff crept into my practice without me even knowing. I was gifted a really beautiful witch's ladder by Rebecca Getchell, who's in the room actually right now. She just started an Etsy shop. Go check it out.
Beautiful.
Isn't it gorgeous? But that's one of the things I think about as something I want to maintain. So it's got all this beautiful intention in it, but if I just let it sit there and don't ever feed it, it feels like it would wane over time. So that's something that I feel like I would feed. Another example, I got I think you can kind of see it if I let's see if I can rotate without making things fall down. Hold on. this little protection dolly, like right there.
Cute.
I got him in a witchy box, and so every once in a while I pull him down and I redress him and sort of recharge him, and he goes back up on the wall. And so he's like my protector in here. And I've got another protector as well, same thing. So I feel like I've started to sort of tiptoe into that sort of world of things that I maintain. Or Danny of Danny Mystic did a honey spell. That was one of the first sort of long-term magical workings I did, where you set it for a whole year. That was really cool. But those things are new. Normally I am the type to just like sit down, do the spell, and then move on. So it's kind of fun to let that stuff sort of creep in and play with different types of spell work. It doesn't always have to follow a specific formula. But sort of speaking of formulas, when you think of spell work, is there, I just love this. I have like a list of questions and it makes me so happy. So are there certain like ingredients I don't mean like literal ingredients, although it could be, but certain things that in your mind, it's a spell when you have blah involved?
I think it really depends on what I'm doing. Again, like I'm kind of a wing it witch, as I like to call it. I have something in mind, and then I'll kind of slowly put piece by piece the elements that I want to include in the spell. Sometimes that might involve doing candle magic with like a tarot card under a clear glass plate, or maybe it's, just bath magic, like a healing spell in the bath, or so it's extremely situational for me. But I think the really big one, the one thing that definitely makes it a spell to me or set that ambiance is candles. Yeah. Definitely. I do that. I use them for everything I do.
Yeah. I think I was thinking about this question myself, and I was trying to think of what are like the common elements across spell work that I do. And typically there are words, either spoken or written, some kind of petition or something I put or something I say. Sometimes that stuff that I say or write is pre-planned. Very often, though, it's organic in the moment, like words of power spoken over something, or writing a petition in the moment, that kind of thing. But often that's one of the main components would be, I think, something written or something, some words of intention.
That makes sense for a writer.
Oh, yeah, good point. I don't even think of myself as a writer. It's so weird to hear out loud.
Book, you're a writer.
I know. It's such a funny thing. And then the other thing I think that sort of makes it feel like a spell work is some kind of correspondences. So I'll usually pull in something to represent some symbol, whether I'm writing a sigil or I'm pulling a candle and like anointing it with an oil or an herb, or even just charging it with an intention, or pulling in a crystal or a tarot card, like you mentioned, or all of the above, because I always start with like, oh, I'm going to pull in these 2 or 3 things, and then 25 things later. Do you do that?
I do that too. And then I'm like, okay, I'm a little overwhelmed. There's a lot of energy. What do we do?
I've done this in videos. I'm like, I'm just going to talk about a simple spell to do blah, blah, blah. And then I'll film the video. I'm like, I've literally written down like 3 things. But then as I start to get everything, this is where I get sucked in. I like open my drawer of herbs and I'm like, well, I could also pull this in and this in. Like curating is actually really hard. But I guess that's it for me. I would say words, some kind of correspondence. Oh, and an action. I feel like I always do some kind of action, whether it's charging something or burning something. Very frequently, I frequently burn things, or like I feel like there's always an action. So those I would say, if I were to pick like my components of a spell, it would almost always be that. It would be words, action, and correspondences, I think. But don't forget, I had like way more time to think about this because I wrote the questions down.
I'd say correspondences is another one for me for sure. I just like kind of what different energies can I bring into this to make this intention kind of have a little more oomph or go the direction that I need it to, or it's really fun to play with.
Totally. I love that. I think correspondences is probably my favorite part. And I also love that I can be really loose with correspondences. And I think I didn't think so initially. Like I really felt in the beginning I was supposed to follow some kind of recipe or some kind of like pre-written spell. And those never felt magical to me ever.
No.
You either, hey?
I basically, sometimes I will actually take a spell and from a book or something, and then I'll start to like shift it the way that I want it to. I'll tweak it or mess with it. That's actually something I do pretty common, especially when I'm not feeling inspired, but I want to do magic and I'm just like, I don't know where to start. So I start flipping through my books with an intention that I might have, and then I'm like, that works, but how can I make it different? And then I start to get inspired to do my own thing.
Yeah, I was going to show this because I mentioned this before we went live. This is one of my favorite little spell decks for that reason. This is so cute. This is Paulina Cassidy's Witchlings. Have you seen this?
It does look cute.
It's so cute, but it's actually not even the fact. So each card has like an intention on it, right? Like wellness or transformation or whatever. But I think what makes this cool is that the little book that comes with it is actually a little book of spells. And I have gotten rid of every book I've ever had that's just a spell book, right? That doesn't have anything more to offer. But this is different because I feel like it's got like a little something really super simple. Energy clearing meditation, or sorry, here, what's a better one? Let's pick a better one. A luck stone. And all you need is a green candle and a malachite or whatever, or some kind of green stone. They're always really super simple. So these are like the perfect ones to like personalize or like get ideas from because they're all super simple. There's like baths or like things where you go out in nature or all kinds of stuff like that. So that's the kind of thing I would go to. But I cook the same way that you described. I'll look up a recipe because I want to know it's like maybe an ingredient people have put together before to make sure it's like going to work, and then I tweak it. So when I go to spell books, I would say that's the kind of thing I do is sort of pull in that kind of information and then like go like, okay, how am I gonna make it my own, or how am I gonna get an idea? YouTube videos are great for that too. I feel like just seeing what kind of things people are doing in their practice and then using that for inspiration.
I think for your Witchlings deck, the other thing that I'd say is that I think that might be a good tool for someone who wants to dip their toes in spellcraft too.
Yeah, it's so great because it's approachable. I was really turned off because especially back in the 90s, there was a lot of books like this where they were very prescriptive and they were very like, collect this ingredient from this type of place at this particular time of the day under the full moon. And I'm like, girl's too busy for that or too lazy for that. That is not happening. So I needed something that was going to be a little bit more like approachable for doing my own thing. Rebecca Getchell asked, okay, but how do we remember to maintain things? Speaking of like maintenance magic, planners are great for this. Witchy planning, setting a reminder on your phone.
Which I know she bullet journals, so
I know you do. I was like, hello, the planner. The planner is asking how we keep track of things to do.
Like, hold up, what?
Wait, what's happening? Yeah, I would definitely put things like that in your planner. And I have not been ashamed of literally writing something on a sticky note with a date and putting it next to the protector guy so that I know when the last time was I refreshed him.
That's a good idea. So simplistic too.
Yeah, like it doesn't have to be fancy. It's just like, oh, Dustin, I made you into such a planner monster. I regret nothing. I mean, it's so true. Oh, I get so bored. It's all in the Aries. That's what Rebecca said. Yeah, like, I mean, there's nothing wrong with refreshing it a different way every time. It's like maybe when I refresh my protection, I anoint him with oil, but then maybe the next time I put a ring of salt around him and sprinkle herbs over him. I mean, it doesn't have to be the same way every time. You could totally change it up to keep it feeling fresh, I would say.
To make moon water differently each time. Sometimes it's just water. Sometimes it has a sprinkle of salt. Sometimes it has like a bit of lavender. I don't know. It depends on what I'm feeling.
Yeah, or sometimes I'll put a sigil under my bottle of moon water to like absorb from below and above kind of thing. I think mixing it up is healthy and good. But that kind of actually is a good segue. I was going to ask you about magical timings. So do you use like astrology, full moon, like new moon, phase of the moon? Do you incorporate timing?
Again, it depends on what I'm doing. Sometimes my best magic has been the most spontaneous.
Same.
But there are times, especially if I'm planning something out well in advance, if I have an intention and I know I want to get done like sometime in the next couple of months, then I'll probably start bringing in magical timing a little bit more. Yeah. I do really enjoy playing with astrology, and I really enjoy playing with kind of planetary magic, what the planets are doing, especially because I'm such a strong believer in my chart and how I get futzed with. And
yeah.
And so to be I think that actually can be very beneficial, but it also is important to not be so rigid with it too, and to know when you can be spontaneous, and that sometimes if you just throw down a spell, it can be extremely powerful. And sometimes if you spend a couple months planning a spell, it can also be very powerful. And those two things are great to utilize as needed.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I am intrigued by, fascinated by, and I want to be the person who's like, I'm going to do a spell about this. What's the correct planetary hour to really boost this energy? Because I do believe those things add oomph to the work that you're doing. But at its most basic level, I feel like 99% of the time where I utilize magical timing is moon phases, and that's like the most advanced I get at this stage, right? It's like, okay, is it a waning moon or a waxing moon? And I typically will use waxing moon or full moon energy for burgeoning or things I want to grow, and waning moon energy for things I want to deplete or remove from my life or cast away. Same thing with like new moon is good for beginnings. But like I'll tend to gravitate towards the basic moon phase correspondences. I think I did a whole chat on the moon phases here. I think I did in this series. So that's like the magical timing that always resonated with me. So I think because the moon moves quickly, so I can kind of see where we're at, and usually can be patient enough to wait until like, you know, a week or two for the next phase or whatever it might be. But yeah, I don't tend to do a lot of forward planning of spell work, which I guess like we kind of covered that idea of like spontaneity versus planning. I think we both incorporate both from the sounds of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like I want to be that witch that's like super ceremonial and involved, but like in real practical life terms, most of my spell work is like really like fly by the seat of my pants, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's what feels doable. I think I'm just busy. I think that's it, you know?
Yeah, I know. Because I mean, most of the time when I can do spell work, it's at night. And by that time I've taken care of kids all day and I'm exhausted. So
I'm tired.
Here we are.
Yeah. Or like I want to incorporate spell work into things that I'm already doing to like unwind or relax, right? Somebody recently, I'm trying to remember, mentioned or brought up the concept of art magic, which is something I'm really fascinated by. And the idea that like you can do, because if you're going to sit down, let's say you're going to sit down to, I just did this the other day, which is why it's fresh on my mind, but let's say you're going to sit down and color a page in a coloring book or something. There's nothing stopping you from like pausing for a moment before you start and like, oh my gosh, pausing before you start and just maybe setting an intention and writing that word of intention like on the page and then coloring over it, or you know what I mean? Or
Mm-hmm.
like painting, like writing something and then painting over it. Oh, Moira does art magic. That's awesome. Yeah, but things like that, you know, where you could like maybe things you're already going to do, or like you're already going to cook a dinner, you could incorporate spell work into that, or I don't know.
I tend to I'll do art magic in that sense as well. A lot of the time it'll either be like lighting a candle and just doing an intention with that and just leaving the candle on my desk while I'm working. Or I like to use Chris Ann's decks, the Muse Tarot and Sacred Creators a lot of the time for that as well.
Yeah.
I've actually started pulling Sacred Creators and writing just whatever card I come up with on my monthly bullet journal spread.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do that show and tell really quick.
Yeah. Show us.
Show. I just started doing this month in May, so you guys get a sneak peek. I don't know if I've got it there. There we go. That's the card that I pulled.
Move beyond intention to belief.
Yes,
oh,
that's the card that
I
pulled, and then I have my card of the month right there too. So to me, that's art magic. Doing that kind of stuff, or doing my bullet journal.
What is happening in the chat right now?
Oh dear, we have a troll.
We have like a really repetitive. I think we're having a problem.
Uh-oh. Yep. We have a troll.
And it's going really fast. Dustin, are you still in here to help us boot people? Thank you. Dave, it's going fast and I don't have my mouse. I'm using my touchpad. Oh boy. Nope. Okay, guys, we are going to hang tight for a second while all this gets under control. Is everything okay, Ben?
Yeah, I'm still laundry.
Peggy needs to get past me.
While you hang out and have fun.
She's working, apparently. But
that's what I was doing until I came here. So I
love the idea of pulling a card and then actually journaling that for sure. That makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, I think we've got bot spam happening.
Fox, you need me to hop on and start?
If you
kicking
can,
things out?
that'd be
Yeah, I can do
awesome.
that.
Yeah, it's going really fast.
I can do it. Kid.
Luckily, YouTube catches a lot of it, which is good.
Peggy's gonna come lay the hammer down.
Yeah, so that poor Dustin isn't all by himself. Sometimes it happens on live streams. It just starts and you get flooded like that. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But anyways, thank you, Dustin. You're amazing. You're doing so good. Everybody clap for Dustin.
Yay,
Thank
Dustin.
you.
Reinforcements are on the way.
Yeah, reinforcements are on the way is right. Oh my goodness. So, okay, so we talked about that. Oh, I was going to ask you about disposing. So this was one of the things that really hung me up a lot in the beginning was the concept of how to dispose, or the idea of how to dispose of your spell remains. Like when you burn stuff, or you, depending, I guess, on what it is, like this idea that you can dispose, or how you dispose of things.
So for me, this became a lot easier when I started living in a house versus an apartment. It was way more difficult in an apartment. So I had to be a lot more mindful of what I was doing. I still am, but everything that I use or dispose of with the intention of it being disposed is biodegradable in some sense. So for instance, the other night I did a spell where I carved a rune on a candle, or not a candle, an apple, and did an intention on that. And then I just left that out on my outdoor altar, and my little woodland critters had their way with it, essentially. Or we have a fire pit out back. So whenever I do have any ashes, I just dump the ashes in the fire pit. And that's usually how I generally dispose of things. I have small children and kittens in my house, so I can't exactly leave stuff hanging about on my altar that could potentially be harmful for any little paws or little fingers. So,
that's good.
Huh?
I wish I had a fire pit. I legitimately wish I had a fire pit. I don't have a fireplace or a fire pit or anything along those lines. So I wish I had something to do. I don't know why chat is freaking crazy. Babe, are you in there? We have problems.
Wow, that's a mess.
Anyways, disposing of spell remains. Okay, I'm trying really hard to focus, but it's incredibly challenging. Anyways, we're dealing with it. It'll be all sorted out shortly, I hope. But anyways, I really struggled with this in the beginning when I was using certain kinds of crystals and certain kinds of herbs and certain kinds of some things that didn't, most things. I guess my issue was if I'm doing a protection spell or I'm doing something to absorb negativity or anything along those lines, I often find that I don't want to necessarily dispose of things all the same way. So sometimes I think the issue is that you want to get rid of or cast off whatever negative energy might be happening. So I feel like I don't want to if it's one thing, I guess, if I can put it in the fire, if I can dispose of it in a way that it's not going to stay, I guess is the best way to say it. So if I can flush it or release it to the earth to be transformed or anything like that, that's pretty good. But yeah.
Wow. My advice on that would actually be take things from nature that you can give back to nature. So say you want to absorb negative energy, you could write whatever is troubling you on a leaf and then go and stand outside and let the wind take it. Or, you could use all the 4 elements in that sense. Water magic and earth magic, burying something that's biodegradable to be buried. Those are all really wonderful ways to go about that intention specifically in a eco-friendly way.
Yeah, totally. Okay, I think we are being flooded to the point where I don't think we're going to be able to keep up. So I think I'm going to have to close the chat. Thanks everybody for hanging in there. I would love to do this again with you sometime, Daina, and maybe dive deeper into the craft, dive deeper maybe into deity work specifically, because I feel like that was a topic we both really wanted to sort of jump off into. And it'd be really fun to do this again. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We're right around that hour mark, so I don't want to start us over again and try to re-find our footing. But I'm sorry about the interruption. That's terrible. But
people suck.
They do suck. But we'll cut them off at the knees here, and we will be off to the races. But thank you again so much. And thank you to everybody for your patience and for joining us for this conversation. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you for everything you contributed and all your questions. If you are watching this after the fact, please do leave your comments and questions down below. Please make sure you go and subscribe to the beautiful Daina, the Shadow Moon Witch. You do wonderful. Like, I really like your rambles when you just turn on the camera and you start talking about a topic.
My night owl rambles.
Yeah, I love those. I love those. So yeah, go check Daina out, subscribe to her channel, and hopefully we can do this again soon. I hope everybody has a great night, and we will talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.